well, hey, it's great to have you here. You and I have known each other for a while. Back when I was slinging home and autos for the Murray Group, I think we met each other at Cape. I think that was the first place, bombing around those events, which were a ton of fun.
Back when we were young professionals.
Yes.
I'm over that threshold now. As soon as I hit 40, I was like, I can't go to a young professionals event.
Yeah.
I was one of the original board members too, but I was like, you kids have fun.
Yeah. It's
Is
tough
that the cutoff?
There's no cutoff. There was no cutoff to the group, but like when you're bumping elbows with like 25-year-olds, there's just something a little different about that vibe, you know.
There's no cutoff, but some people should have cut themselves off.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's probably true. So
there should be like an enforcer. You're the one to deal with these people. Yeah.
Yeah. There's definitely you never want to be that guy who's like rolling through the young professionals crowd and everyone's kind of on the side like, oh man, what really? Like, come on.
We had a couple of those. There was always a couple of those. We know who they were.
Yeah. We made a lot of good connections in that group though. That was fun back then.
Well, you know what was really awesome about a group like that, and this is one of the things I recommend to young professionals when they get started, like, because I go talk to a lot of classes. I stay tight with UAlbany's business school, and I'm an adjunct instructor at Schenectady County Community College, so I teach intro to business there because I went to SEC before I went to UAlbany, so I still have a pretty special connection there. And so once a semester, I usually teach intro to business. So I'm giving advice to people trying to get into business. And a lot of times I'll talk to a class and they're usually talking about getting their first job, you know, that kind of thing. I'll usually be a guest speaker on that kind of topic. And one of the things I'll tell them is about like my own experience with networking with peers when you're a young professional is you grow up together, right? Like there's a long-term investment. You're not going to meet decision makers when you're 25 and you go to a networking event full of 25-year-olds. But as somebody who did that 13 years ago or whatever, I mean, you and I and other people that we know that went when we were like, 20 something, now some of us have moved on and we all grew up together, and all of a sudden some of these people are decision makers and some of these people are influential. And these people that, we grew up as young professionals hearing from all these guys and girls in their 50s, 60s that were business like leaders, icons, and they mentioned, oh yeah, I've known this guy for 20, 30 years, right? Like they started out building those relationships just like we did. And so I tell them, like, it's not going to pay off in the short term, but I mean, you're going to grow up together.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. I mean, that in part, I think this podcast was our effort to try to do some of that in the hectic world. When you start to get a family, you got kids, you got different things going on, man, it's tough to carve out 2 hours for a networking event. It becomes really difficult. It's a commitment. And, what I've found over my career is it doesn't replace being in the same space as somebody, but being able to spend this time and talk to them and share their story with this is that kind of networking in a way, or at least an extension of that kind of thing. And I think, the more you can take a few minutes and have a conversation, that isn't, hey, let me pitch you something. I think it's really valuable long-term.
Yeah. And so often when you're a business owner, a lot of the conversations you are having are, you're trying to stir up business. A lot of them are selling conversations. That's one of the things I really love, for example, about teaching that class at Schenectady Community College is I'm in the sandbox for about 45 to 50 minutes. You know what I mean? Like we go there and we can talk in theoretical, and we're not there to like sell anything, and we're just just kind of talking theory. We're stepping out of reality for a little bit and just kind of talking like we are now. Like we're not trying to sell each other anything. This isn't like a commercial or anything like that. We're just talking, and it's kind of a nice break from a morning full of selling things.
I was thinking, Rye and I were on a call earlier with a mastermind group we have, and one of the guys was saying like, I got to, get my kids situated and, trying to figure out, like, I have somebody who's a family member going to help watch them for a couple hours and, just that whole thing. And it got me thinking like that would be so fun. And like when I turn it off for the day, like when I'm able to turn it off and then your point to the sandbox, like, to just take yourself out of this and just think like a kid and act like a kid and just like, that is that's relieving. It's fun. It just you're flipping a switch of a different role. And, to that point, I could appreciate, as you were saying, teaching. I'm like, man, that would be kind of cool just to do something totally different,
Yeah. Because what you're doing in your everyday and the deals you have, and like your anecdotes come in handy when you're trying to teach the lessons, but your main goal there is to teach them these lessons, not to just babble about your day or whatever. Like you can insert some examples to add some depth, but you're there for a different purpose. Kind of like yesterday, and I try to do this more often, but yesterday around 5:15 or so, I just turned my phone off for about an hour because my son's 8 months old and I wanted to just play with him for a bit. And so I was originally going to turn the notifications off, and I was like, you know what, it's 5:15. Nothing's going to happen in the next hour. If, it's not going to be like the end of the world, it can wait. So I'm just going to turn it off and I'm just going to focus on him during this time frame. Yeah. So those little breaks are nice. The other thing I like is, there's one of the reasons I love playing poker, because it's one of the few times that I can zone out everything else and I'm only paying attention to the game. I'm literally just thinking about the cards. I'm thinking about the next hand. I'm thinking about the bets. There's no room for anything else in there. So it's like meditating.
Yeah, I think that stuff, one of the things like that for me was golf. Okay. And because I love to golf, but really, and I love to play with other guys, there's no doubt. But one of the things that I used to love to do was just walk the course by myself. We were members at the Roost. This year we're not for a bunch of reasons, but I would just go over there and I'd play like 6 holes by myself, throw my bag on my back. I'd walk. I just find open holes that there weren't people on. And it was like you said, just for an hour and a half or whatever it was just all I thought about was golf. And it was, hey, it's a nice day. I'm walking, I'm outside, and it just kind of like resets your brain. And then you come back to the world and you're like ready to grab it and go again. And
it's like having rest, or it's like you woke up from a good night's sleep or whatever.
Yeah.
It pulls you into the moment.
Yep. Yeah, there's no doubt. So dude, you've had a couple different iterations inside the same industry, and now you have your own company, second company that you've owned in this space. First one was Pinnacle. Now Staffegy. Talk to me a little bit about the new company, the decision to start it. And, you had explained when we had talked before, when we weren't recording, about how you came up with the name. And I was really interested in that. I thought it was really interesting how you wanted the name to represent your position in the market. And I think that's something that a lot of people, when they're starting a business, especially, struggle with naming it. So I'm interested in that.
Yeah. So I ran the business I had 2 partners. One was kind of behind the scenes and the other was running the business with me. And between a couple of factors, like the fact that my first kid was on the way, and I was considering, lifestyle change type of thoughts. Because recruiting is very fast paced. It's very competitive, especially if you're in a like really highly competitive space like IT recruiting. It was a few factors came together, right? So I was thinking about like, what do I want to do? My other 2 partners had different directions they kind of wanted to go. And I still wanted to do staffing, but I didn't necessarily want to do the same business again, right? Because it was very transactional. It was definitely a lot of stress, a lot of urgency. And I kind of wanted to do different type of work, right? Like I had done a decent amount of like executive level placements or higher level, like upper management type of positions, or maybe some more key roles. Like, a company needs to hire their first sales manager, or I'm working with a startup right now that's hiring, they just got like $1 million in funding and they're hiring their first couple employees. These are super important hires and a lot of work has to go into this, right? It's not just, they're not in a position where they can say, here's a job description, go find me someone, right? And I didn't really want to work with customers like that anymore anyway. Just because I wanted to feel like I've been doing this for a long time. I wanted to feel like I was adding more value. So I wanted to reboot as a company that was more of a consulting company that does recruiting as one of its functions, right? So that's where I came up with the staffing and strategy and kind of mush the words together, because I've done some engagements where I consult with a company on a recruiting process. I've had situations where, I'm showing them how to use tools that maybe they're not optimizing. Maybe they have a couple of teams recruiting for different business units, and they're all doing different things. And the company doesn't even realize they have technology that they're paying for in one area that's not even being used in another department. And so just helping them make the most of that, right? Or just helping them optimize. It's not even just where do I find people, but like, how do I manage the process better, right? And how do I use the tools that I have better, right? There's parallels for any function in a business like that too. You could probably do the same thing for marketing for a company, right? So I wanted to do more of that kind of work. I wanted to do more searches where there's a lot of different types of customers in staffing. Some, they're just like, hey, here's a job description, go find somebody. If you can find them, we'll pay you. There's others that really want to work with you and spend a lot of time up front and really invest time in, must be on a group text or something. Sorry about the noise in the background. I wanted to work with more companies where they were willing to invest the time up front. I'm going to silence that. Hold that thought, would you? 1 sec.
No, you're fine.
That's what editing's for, right?
Yeah.
So actually what's funny is that really was a group text. It's a bunch of my fraternity brothers that do, I've been playing poker online, and they just send a whole
That's going to go on to 145.
Yeah, it is. And cause they're all shit talking and stuff. And I was like, at first I thought I just got hit with a bunch of texts, and I also want to make sure it wasn't from Lauren, but it really was those guys. So there's a lot of different types of clients you work with, and probably you find the same in real estate or in marketing, where it's not that there's anything wrong with any type of those clients. I mean, people run their business the way they want to. Some of them value a recruiter more than others. Some of them don't have time to engage with a recruiter. They want good results. A real estate agent, I'm sure there's people who are like, yeah, find me a place. Here's some basic parameters. The agent finds them some things. They're like, these aren't quite right, but they won't tell you why. So you're like, we need some back and forth here to really do it.
Yeah,
right.
Good question answer. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to run a different type of business where, instead of relying more heavily on the quick fill positions where we didn't have a whole lot of information and we didn't have a lot of deep engagement with the client, to shift to a more customer centric type of setup where I really feel like the companies I work with now, it's like I work there. Right. And that's the dynamic I really wanted to go for. And that's the dynamic I want them to feel. So whether it's a company that I just hired a compliance officer for, a nonprofit that we just wrapped that up last week, I spent a ton of time with their management team. I was in touch with them constantly. It was very high touch process. We found them somebody, we closed it last week. Like the people you talk to, I want them to feel like I work there. Right. A lot of times the complaints the candidates have is that the recruiter doesn't really know anything about the job or know anything about the company, right? I wanted to focus on more on that type of work, right? Because at this point, I've been doing this for 16 years. I've had some good years. I've made some good money. Like, it's not just the money and it's not just the placements. Like, I actually want to feel like I'm doing something. I'm really adding value, right? So we're focused more on a customer segment where there's more commitment from both of us up front. I don't work on as many jobs at once. If you're a contingency recruiter where you just get paid if you fill it, you're working on a whole bunch of jobs in the hopes that you hit certain ratios, right? I'm gonna work on 20 jobs in the hopes that I fill 4. But the problem with that is, although the other customers didn't pay you anything, they were counting on you and they were expecting something from you, right? A real estate agent, they don't get paid until the closing. But if that agent ignores a customer, they're going to be like, well, that guy sucks. That Mike Field, the person who works for him, they're not a very good agent, right? But if you took on that work, you have to be able to deliver on it, right? So no, an agent shouldn't be meeting with someone unless they actually have the time to work with them, right? So similarly, a recruiter shouldn't take on more work than they can handle. And unfortunately, the contingency model is generally based on bringing as many jobs as possible and fill what you can. And as long as you hit your number, is a good month.
Is there a ratio like in the industry or for your personal assessment? How would you rate that?
I would say 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 is pretty common.
Job placement?
Or like of jobs you fill versus jobs you take on as a recruiter.
So
I would say 1 in 3. What's that?
So it's like 1 to 3 to 1 to 4 is what you fill from what you take.
Right. So you would go out and you would get customers you'd sign an agreement with them that basically said if you found someone, they would hire them, right? And then of those, let's say you put them up on your board, right, of the jobs you're working on, you're probably going to fill a quarter to a third of those most of the time. Now, there's a lot of variables, right? So there's some customers that only use me, so they got higher priority, and those got filled. There's other customers that used multiple recruiting firms, which isn't always the greatest idea. I think they figure they're improving their odds because like, well, I don't pay any of them, and this will just increase my odds that someone will fill it, and I don't really care who fills it. But the problem is that on the candidate side, that really taints the image of that company. If they're getting called by like 4 or 5 different recruiters about the same job and they're all getting represented differently, it seems on the surface like that solution is good for the client, but it's really not. It's not client focused. It's not customer focused to do a contingency model, right? And I know because I lived it for 15 plus years that like it seems like, oh, there's no risk. You don't pay unless we find someone. But the reality is, like, if you met with me and you want to work with me and I'm going to find you someone, it's probably someone that's important to your business, right? If I don't find you someone, or none of those other recruiters find you someone, like, you're still left hanging. Your business can't move forward. You still need that person, right? And a good recruiter shouldn't go out and take on more jobs than they can handle, because then you're telling everybody you're going to deliver for them. You're over-promising and under-delivering, right? So I just, over the years, gotten to recognize when maybe certain jobs or certain companies are going to be more amenable to the way I want to work and some aren't. And I just try to steer myself towards the ones that are going to be willing to spend more time up front. Because I explained to them, I explained the dynamic. I explained to them that, you know, the more time we spend up front together, and if I'm the only one working on this job and I know that, so there's pressure, I got to make sure I fill it, right? If you're going to have that information sharing back and forth, like we were talking about, whether it's a real estate agent or whatever else. Ryan, if you're going to market for somebody and they were just like, I want online marketing, you know, when you were doing, you know, when you were more marketing focused, I know you're doing the agency again, but if when you were working at, even when you were working at the Murray firm there, like if they just said, you know, run some ads, find us clients, you'd be like, well, I'm going to need more information than that, right? You're not going to be able to do a good job. So I just want to be able to do a better job for clients. I want to, you know, there's enough work out there that I want to work with the clients that want to spend a bunch of time up front so that we can actually be successful. And what's really fun for me is a lot of times I'm helping define the need. You know, a lot of times there isn't a fully fleshed out job description. Sometimes I'm sitting down with, you know, a leader in an organization, and we're talking about, there's some back and forth about what they're looking for. And then at that point, I can also set some realistic expectations, right? If someone says, you know, gee, Mike, I'd really like a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom house in Loudonville, and I'd like to pay $350,000, you'd be like, well, let's talk through this. Now, if they come to you already in their head that that's what they're looking for, it's harder for you to walk back from that. But if they come to you and say, hey, I'm looking for a first home, here's my needs, here's what my family looks like, here's what our needs are, here's the parameters I have in mind, you're going to have the opportunity to have some back and forth and maybe guide them towards what likely success would look like, right? So that's what I really enjoy, is that type of work, right? So anyway,
I think this is a big trend coming out of, I think for a lot of professionals in general, but also in the post-COVID world, is really defining your clients and establishing a deeper relationship with them. You know, this, you know, what you described, it's funny you're talking, and I was saying to myself, like, this is exactly what I'm doing in insurance. And I know it's exactly, you know, speaking for Mike, I know it's what he does in real estate. And it's, you know, the exact same thing, where the person who's just who's thinking transactionally is the easiest client to get, but often the most expensive for your business, because they don't value what you provide. They're gonna jump to another provider the moment one bumps into them, just like you. And I talk to a lot of insurance professionals about this, but we're so drawn to the first person that says yes. But like, if they're not willing to, one of the things we talk about in insurance is, I don't like bidding for work. Like what someone will say is, I'm going to put my insurance program out for bid, and I'm going to get a bunch of agents to bid on my insurance. And what they don't realize is literally all those agents are pulling from the same pool of carriers if they're worth their salt. So essentially what you're doing is muddying the waters, telling all the underwriters that this person is willing to pay, and you get worse coverage for more money because you have 3 or 4 guys out banging the marketplace, talking to all the same people for coverage options.
Same thing happens in recruiting. Exact thing. Yeah. Work with 5 recruiting firms, and you're looking for a certain type of software developer. They're all calling the same people.
Yeah.
Plus, it's like in my, if you have 5 people putting in 10% effort a piece because they're like, screw it, man. I don't want to, like, this guy's not committed to me. I'm not committed, right. Why am I I'd rather focus on, like you said, cherry pick the 4 or 5 or 6 or however many that you would operate with, and say, look, I'm all in on these guys. They appreciate what I'm worth. I appreciate filling the job for them. I'm going to ask the right questions, get educated, find out exactly what they're looking for. I'm going to go all in on it. And then, those people are going to appreciate it down the line. They're probably going to refer you because, you're doing a good job because you took the extra step and actually performed,
And you're using your time wisely too, right? So like one of the things I experienced running a contingency staffing firm for 10 years is the amount of wasted time, right? If you are approaching it where, let's say you fill 1 out of 3 jobs that you bring in. So you're working on, I don't know, let me find easy math. Let's say you got to fill 3 jobs a month to make your number, right? And let's say you're working on 9 or 10 even. Like, that's a good ratio, but let's say you're working on that. So throughout the week, you and your team are expending effort somewhat equally on all of those jobs. So you're doing a little bit on each of them, right? If you, like in most of the cases I usually get some kind of a retainer, so that way I know it's actually going to close, or at least get an exclusive, so I know it's worth the time, right? So now if I'm only working on like 2 or 3 jobs in a month and they're going to close, you know how much further along you get and how much deeper you can go and how much like more efficient your time is, because when you're working on a bunch and you don't know what's going to fill, you don't want to go down a rabbit hole. You want to kind of have equal coverage. But if you know that, like, listen, I just cut out 2/3 of the time that I normally waste, and now I can turn around and sink that time into doing a better job for my customer. And not only am I set up to succeed, I'm going to succeed because I'm spending all my time on what's that pumpkin book? You know what I'm talking about? There was I gotta find it. Put it this way. You ever hear a phrase like, you water the plants that are growing, or that's maybe not the right phrase.
Kids book or like, no?
There's a business book, the pumpkin principle.
I was gonna say like Spookly or something stupid,
Spookly.
Like the kids.
Yeah.
Thinking,
Well, so,
Chris, you'll know about Spookly soon enough.
Oh, will I?
Yeah, that's coming.
So basically, we're trying to fight the fights you can win, and basically doubling down on the efforts that are fruitful, and disregarding the things that just aren't adding value. It's funny because even the 2 people that work for me have gotten used to, like, there's a less frantic pace now, because I'm like, well, you don't have to worry about, I need to have a few people in front of this company, a few people in front of that company, a few people in front of that. It's not as hectic. It's not as frantic, because the other thing that you're also trying to do is contingency rewards speed, not quality, right? If there's a company that said, I'm going to pay you if you fill the job, I got to get somebody in front of them right away, because a few things could happen. Another agency could present someone. That's the most obvious. Another is as time passes, you hear time kills all deals. They might figure out how to get by without that person, right? So if it takes me a couple of weeks to find them someone and they have no commitment up front other than I'll pay you if you find someone, if they figure out a workaround, that job just went away, right? So now when you're in contingency and you're only getting paid when you fill something, like speed is everything.
Yeah.
So quality is sacrificed at the cost of speed. If you've got the position and you're the only one working on it, or they've put a retainer up front and you've spent time together, like they're invested, and you can honestly take your time, like drag your feet, but you can do the work right.
Yeah. And I think too often we put it on our customers. All they care about is the transaction. They don't value us. And one thing that I've had to look in the mirror on in this iteration of my own business here, Rogue Risk, is like, why am I going after the customers, and why am I spending time on customers who do only value the transaction? Because that's the case. Now, some you can talk to, explain to them the process and what you can do, and then they'll come around. But there are people who they just don't, their methodology, their thought process on one particular topic, be it real estate, staffing, insurance, whatever it is, it could be marketing services, it could be sale, it could be a consultant. It is get in, get out. It's a transaction. I don't care. And I think a very hard thing for a lot of people to do, myself included, is you get that opportunity to sit in front of someone and you don't say no. You're looking for, but if I can just convince them of this, then they'll respect, the work that I'm doing. And sometimes you just got to say, look, like, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you giving me an audience, but we are not a good fit for each other. And then that way you get your time back to spend it on the people who you can really add value to.
And that's been a tough transition, right? Like going from just doing contingency work to switching to more like retained jobs and turning down some business, which, I mean, turning down business, kind of like turning down opportunities is probably a better way to put it. It's tough because that voice is inside of you saying, well, you could take the order from them, and maybe if you did find somebody, you didn't have to put a lot of effort in it, you might still fill it and get a fee. Like that's still in the back of your head. Mm-hmm. And it's funny where you say like blaming the customer. I mean, yeah, it's easy to say, oh, well, they don't value it, or they don't understand what we're worth, or whatever. But, I remember I met with a consultant one time, and we were talking about we're doing some strategic planning, and talked about, what kind of business are you? Are you a business that values operational efficiency? Are you a business that values customer intimacy? Are you a business that values innovation, et cetera? Because it was important to know that as my business, because I needed to look for companies that had the same alignment, right? Which is very eye-opening to think about it that way, right? If there's a company that values operational efficiency, which is, the nice way of saying like cheap, basically they're trying to do things at the cheapest possible cost without sacrificing quality, right? A company that values operational efficiency for the most part is probably not going to pay a very high recruiting fee. They're going to try to get like a lower fee. A company that values customer intimacy, which is what I'm trying to build, is going to like the fact that I want that kind of match. So they're either going to like it or they're not. It was really, I never thought about it that way in terms of like what's the orientation of the customer you're selling to in terms of what they value and what type of organization they're trying to build. And then figuring out, is that in alignment with the type of organization I'm trying to build? So then now I know why we would work together or why we wouldn't be able to work together. And it's just, everybody's different. Like if someone, everybody likes different kinds of cars. If somebody calls you and is trying to sell a car that you're just not interested in, doesn't mean that they're like a bad person or they're cheap or whatever. They just don't value that.
I just think no matter, and we didn't really get into it, Chris, but my dad's been doing real estate since '74. That's all I grew up with. Okay. And if you asked me when I was 13 or 15 or 21, I would have been like, I'm going to get in real estate. Right. And so like when I talk to somebody like you, there's a couple things, and I've probably said this on other shows, but I just like hearing other perspectives of businesses because I'm like a one-trick pony. It's all I ever knew. But what you're telling me, you're basically pre-qualifying that job to make sure you can do the best you can. I have a saying, it's, if you know better, you can do better, right? And it's from one of my mentors. But when you pre-qualify that client and you get to know what they're looking for, like, better, you can perform better. You can, and the other thing he said was basically you're a quality business guy that wants to work with other people who appreciate that, and that you're going to go all in with them. Like, to me, that's the only way that matters. Because if you don't do that, it's churn and burn. And by that time, you're going to get burned out, and it's not going to be fun. And it's just, you're on the hamster wheel. So like, to me, like, you are, just like Ryan or myself or other people we know, like, why not pick quality and really dive into people than that churn and burn mentality? Because at the end, that just creates your burnout.
I think there's sorry, I don't mean to talk over time, because I think, and this is what sticks in my head, I think there is a sexiness to volume that captures people and puts us down that path that you just talked about, Mike. Like, in your head, you're like, oh, John did 10 transactions and I'm only doing 6 transactions. And even if your transactions produce more revenue, in your mind, there's something about that number that, like, you're like, if I could just do a couple more. And I think it takes a lot of maturity to be able to pump the brakes and go, no, like, I did 6 and John did 10, but it took him 50 deals to get his 10. And it only took me 13 deals to get my 6. And I think that's a big step as you mature into your career, is being able to understand that. I think logically we can understand it, but emotionally sometimes you get caught up in the number.
Oh yeah. And I definitely was on that hamster wheel for a long time, because I was operating in a very traditional model where it is a lot of churn and burn. And I mean, yeah, there were some customers I feel like we did a better job for, just because maybe we had a tight relationship, or we had like repeat customers, and certainly those got prioritized. But yeah, there was the appeal of high volume. You look at, the lists and you're like, oh, this company had this many placements last year or whatever. You look at, the big companies that you're like, oh, how come I'm not in there? You see like a hire happen and you're like, oh, this company is working with them. Why am I not working with them? Like, you get caught up in that. And I felt like this was a really good opportunity. And let me tell you, it also required a little intervention on behalf of my partner, because he was like, listen, I know you can do better work than this. I know you want to do better work than this. I want to help you do this. He's like, so if you want to, it's your partner ways with your clients, or with your other partners. You want to do something different. You want to kind of, instead of just continue the Pinnacle name, you want to kind of rebrand and do something different, which we have a new website and other stuff that's underway, because I still haven't really fleshed out the brand as well as I'd like to. And I've been doing a lot of work on that. That's one of the nice things during this kind of downtime, is we've been spending a lot of time on our kind of relaunch to refine our message. Because I kind of threw something up there quick, and that's my fault. But he basically was like, and he's been a friend for a long time, Dave, he was like, I'm going to give you the backing and the support and also the mentoring to keep you focused on doing the work you want to do. Because a lot of our conversations will go back to, like, I'll talk to him about stuff we're working on. I'll talk to him about some potential deals. I'll talk to him about a situation with a client, and he'll bring me back to, is that the kind of business that you said you want to do? Because I remember that you told me what you want to do, and that kind of sounds like what you used to do. And I'd be like, yeah, you're right. So there's still a lot of, I'm not all the way there. Like,
that's a good friend.
But yeah, it is a really good friend, because, he'll challenge me on a daily basis and make sure. And he's like, all I'm holding you to is what you said that you wanted to do. He's like, you can do whatever you want. But I'm just saying, he's like, I'm just saying, you said you want to do this, and what you're telling me sounds like that. And it like forces you to look in the mirror and stay on track. And, is this constantly checking? Is this the direction that we want to go? Is this the type of deal that we want? Is this a customer that we want? And that it would be impossible to do this without that help.
You guys, I assume you guys are always, I shouldn't assume, are you always looking for new, like, businesses and companies to work with, or do you have like a certain amount that you have, or how do you look at the growth model or whatever?
So we're definitely always looking, because what I kept, one of the nice things about closing one company and opening a new one is that if you didn't want to continue work with a particular customer, it's nice and clean, right? And fairly objective. I didn't have to like fire customers. I kind of, there were people I might have gotten in bed with 10 years ago and on terms that I wouldn't really want to do now. So it was kind of nice to start from scratch. But there was several companies that were in alignment with what we wanted to do, and we brought those relationships over. But like any business wants to grow, you can't just rely on a handful of clients. Like, you need to maintain a pipeline. And these were customers that I had a very good relationship with, where, maybe I knew the president of that company for 10 years and I hired 24 people for him over that time. And we had a really good rapport, and I could sit down with him and saying, here's what I'm trying to do now. Here's the type of work I want to do. Here's the way it would work. And here's the type of commitment I would need from you, but here's what I'm going to give you in return. Right. Now the trick, I think, is finding new customers that from scratch that buy into that. Right. Because it's one thing to go to somebody, and say, hey, Ryan, I've known you for 10 years. We've done a lot of business together. Here's how I think I can do a better job for you. What do you say about giving it a try? Is a different sell, right? So now it's more like we're thinking through, how do we market this different approach? How do we get new customers other than like the people that I can just pick up the phone and call? Make something like a repeatable pipeline.
If we were to say, and Ryan, if we were to say to you right now, or the people listening out there, like, who's your target market, or who would we keep an ear out for? Somebody that you might be able to help. Like, again, is it specifically that certain sector of the market, or is it large businesses, small businesses, growing businesses, established? Like, who would you say you would most likely be a good fit for right now?
I'm going to say that key, like, critical roles are probably the best fit for this, because most of the time a company is willing to invest more time.
That would be like VP, C-suite, like that kind of level.
Yeah, like that. Those are a couple of the obvious examples, but maybe for whatever reason, for that particular business, like filling this position or backfilling this position or whatever is really critical to the next phase of their business. Or, maybe it's, in this one case, I'm working with a startup and it's a couple of key initial hires, but another case, like, hey, we're trying to launch a new line of business, and like, we need to get this person and this person in place for that to happen. I think that when it's a critical hire, there's more focus on let's get it right, and let's get it right the first time, and let's spend a little more time up front. It's a little more satisfying for me because I feel like I'm really contributing to the growth of that business versus just like adding a staff member. To, like, say there's a team of, a bunch of people doing a certain function, not that I would necessarily turn away the business because it's the type of customer I'd like to work with, but the key hires, I feel like those are situations where it makes the most sense, because we also invest a lot of time and money in some high level assessments and things like that. So, sales positions, management positions, where you really, like, if you hire a software engineer, you give them a coding test, you can figure out if they can develop or not, and then it's just a matter of figuring out team fit. But if you're trying to hire a manager, you're trying to hire a salesperson or a sales leader, there's a lot of gray area. They interview well, they have some numbers, a brag book, whatever, but like, you don't really know until they get into the job. So really digging into understanding their behaviors and what makes them tick to be able to predict success is really critical. So I think those are the positions that we do better with. That
and
fit better with.
You're meeting with the people at the company. Like, how deep inside that company are you meeting with? Are you meeting with like one person who makes the decision? Or are you meeting with like 6 people? Like, I got to make sure this dude meshes with all that.
So, and that's a good point. That's another reason why, like, not to knock like maybe like a staff level position, but if you have a bunch of people in like an accounting department and you need to hire like another clerk, it doesn't make sense for you to spend a whole lot of time up front and have a bunch of stakeholders involved. That's kind of overkill for this type of job. But when I hired the first compliance officer for a company locally, the first ever compliance officer, I met with the CEO, I met with the VP of HR, I met with the CFO, I met with their head of like programs, operations, really, essentially, all the kind of key people that would be interfacing with this person, and spent time with each of them to get their perspective on the job, and then kind of meshed all that together, and then went back to the CEO and said, okay, here's the common things everyone's looking for. Here's some deviations that we want to be aware of. Because what will happen is often you'll bring in a candidate for a company. They'll, based on one person's input, right? You met with the hiring manager, who's the ultimate say, right? But then they're the one with the authority to sign an agreement, the one with the authority to sign a contract. But there's other people on their team that have opinions. And if you don't involve them in the beginning, you may spin your wheels a lot, because you may get someone and you're like, based on what Mike told me, this person's perfect, and Mike wants to hire the person. Now it's time to have a panel interview with the rest of the team. And they're like, I don't know, Mike, I picture this being something totally different.
Yeah.
Now we're back to the drawing board, and you're like, listen, Chris, I really like that guy, but after going through with the team, it really seems like we need this versus that. So we got to do that work up front. The companies that are willing to do that work up front, basically, it doesn't matter the industry, the companies that are willing to do that work up front are the companies I want to work with.
That's like, hey, you want to sell your house? Okay, I'll meet you at 4:00. I'll be there. Are all the decision makers going to be present?
I got a buddy who just wrote a book. It's available on Amazon. It's called The Extra 2 Minutes. And it's specifically, it's geared towards the insurance industry, but this applies to anybody. And basically the whole crux of the book is the tasks, the mentality, the things that you need to do, these extra 2 minutes that you can take as a provider of a service that define you from everybody else. No one wants to take his whole mentality is no one wants to take the extra 2 minutes. No one wants to look up the Facebook page and see if they got kids. No one wants to figure out if they're married. No one wants to figure out if they lived in the area for 30 years or they just moved here 2 days ago. Like that's the whole crux of his book. And I've found, he is a mentor of mine, and I found that to be, it's a game changer. It's a complete game changer. Whether you're coming in cold on a cold call or something, or this is someone that you've known for 10 years, spending extra 2 minutes. So when you walk into that meeting, you are prepared, you know what's going on, you know who they are, you know who you got to talk to. It is an absolute game changer. And
it's not just on the sales side, it's on the customer side. So the customer that's willing to put in the extra 2 minutes is the customer where we're going to have success together. I want to take on your job, not because I want to be an order taker, but because I want to help fill this position. And I know from experience that, just like you do with meeting with all the decision makers up front with the house, that I need to meet with everybody who's involved in the decision and get all their perspectives before we start looking for anybody.
Yeah.
Because then when we get to the finish line, we're not going to get the same types of issues that you probably encountered, Mike.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question about the type of companies I work with, like I said, the companies that are willing to do that, and it's not everybody's willing to do that.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I appreciate your time. I want to be respectful of it. And this has been tremendous. I mean, we've talked a lot about, I think a portion of the engagement that you have with individuals and the mindset that is so key. I mean, it's something that I work on and try to work on every day is getting out of the transactional mindset, which is so easy. Like it's so easy to just like, let me just quote this thing real quick and throw it out at somebody.
You fall back in it easily, so easily.
Yeah. I mean, in our mastermind this morning, I was complaining to Mike because I fell into that trap. I put 4 hours into an account to have the guy just ghost me, because I didn't do the work up front to establish the respect and relationship that was necessary. And when you think about that, it's like infuriating, but I think you use it as a lesson, and we've all done it, you know what I mean? And you just try not to do it as often, I guess, as you get going. So hey, let everyone know who's listening, where can they get a hold of you? Where should they connect with you? So if they just want to reach out, or maybe they want to talk to you a little bit, like where can they do that?
Yeah, sure. My website is staffegyllc.com. So staffegyllc.com. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. I probably even have my email address in the header. So just, add me on there, reach out. I try to make myself pretty easy to find. So LinkedIn is probably a good bet, or, just chris.wessell, Wessell @staffegyllc.com. Shoot me an email. Can call me too. 518-618-1169 is my direct line. Happy to talk to anybody I'm always happy to talk to people who are looking, because you never know what kind of searches I'm going to get. But I'm also, if somebody's willing to put in the time as a company and they really value the amount of effort that goes into looking for someone for them, and they also value the fact that candidates appreciate it a lot. Like when I represent your company and I know your company and I know the job, the people that I engage with want to come work for you because they see that you value, the process enough to really put the time in. So it really makes a difference to candidates as well.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, hey,
Chris, thanks for your time, man.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Appreciate
guys.
your time. Appreciate you. Good luck with the business, and we'll talk again soon, man.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Be good, bud.